Today I'm going to talk about releasing audiobooks and ebooks simultaneously. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Seth, and this video is going to be a mess, I can tell already. But that's what you're going to get, because I'm doing this video in one take. Sorry, my ADD is like clipping this morning. Simultaneous ebook and audiobook releases. This is probably going to be a pretty short one because it's really not that complicated of a subject. A lot of people say that the ideal scenario when you release a book is that it comes out in all formats simultaneously. And there is good reason for that. But is that actually the ideal scenario? I think it depends a lot on your positioning, as with everything in selling books. But let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of simultaneous release versus staggered release. Pros. First, it's easier for the customer if they can get it in all the different formats. Plus, it allows for people who want to buy multiple formats to do that immediately through things like WhisperSync, which is this really cool program Amazon has where if you buy an ebook, you can get a discounted audiobook as well. And a lot of people take advantage of that because they'll swap between listening and reading in a book. The other big pro is that it builds bigger buzz initially because you have people who are in two completely different camps talking about it. The reality is that your ebook and your physical book audiences are different from your audiobook audiences. And so when you have both of them talking about your book simultaneously, it just creates bigger buzz. And bigger buzz often leads to higher adoption rates. Higher adoption rates obviously are more sales, and you get this snowball effect because it drives you up in the rankings. And that is a pretty important reason why you might want to simultaneously release. However, there are a lot of people who actually swear by staggered releases. And the reason is because there tends to be a pretty sharp fall off after about a month or 2 months. So you'll release a book and it'll be going gangbusters for the first month, and then you almost inevitably see a pretty sharp decline. The question is, how do you stop that decline from happening? Well, if you can release your audiobook staggered so that they're a couple of months apart, you'll often get a second bump, bringing your rankings back up, introducing your book to new readers, and generally putting it out in front of a wider audience. It also gives a second opportunity for people to chime in on social media and say, hey, this book was great, I really loved it, or this one character is hilarious, I thought it was awesome. Plus, if you wait for a simultaneous release, you often have to delay the ebook because it takes so much longer to produce an audiobook than it does to prep an ebook for publication. And so what will often happen is you'll have to sit on the ebook for sometimes 6 months or even a year. And I've had that experience where I wrote something and then it just didn't come out for a year. And that can be a little bit frustrating because by that time, you've usually just moved on. You're onto other things, you're not thinking about that book specifically, which can make marketing a little bit harder. At the end of the day, there are pros and cons for both sides, and it really just depends on where you are positioned. What I would say is that if you are releasing a new series, then simultaneous release is probably more important because you want as big a buzz around it as you can possibly get. However, for releases later in a series, especially when you get into the 6+ territory, where you're releasing book 6, book 7, book 8, book 9, that sort of thing, it's really just not very important. As long as you're communicating clearly with your readers, they're going to be excited about getting the book when they get the book. And if they're an audiobook reader and they have to wait a month or two, that's probably fine. Now, some of those readers might say, hey, that's not an ideal scenario. I'd really like to have my books faster, please. But unfortunately, the realities of audiobook production just make it take a lot longer. If I finish an ebook, I can have it uploaded the very next day, and within 5 days, it's going to be on Amazon available for purchase. If I finish my manuscript and hand it to my narrator, it could be months before it's available on Audible. It all just depends on the schedule of the narrator It depends on how quickly Audible is moving, because sometimes they take up to a month to upload an audiobook, even when they have it completely finished. So there are all sorts of considerations from an author's point of view as to whether or not they push for simultaneous release or they just put them out as they come. Different people swear by different models, and the reality is that none of them are particularly better. They're all just different. So if you have an ebook and your audiobook is not quite done and you really want to publish your ebook, great, do it. Understand that you will be giving up a little bit of the buzz, but you will also get a bump on the back end when a couple months later you release the audiobook. So it's really sort of 6 of one, half dozen of another, and just depends on what you specifically want to get out of the process. I find that an answer to a lot of questions about how to do author stuff in the most optimal way is just whatever works for you is probably fine. If simultaneous release really floats your boat, awesome, do it. If you don't particularly care and you want to just throw things out as they come, then staggered is fine. What's way more important than that, like so astronomically more important than that, is that you write good books and that you produce them at a pace that keeps your audience engaged.